How we doing? How we doing? Sorry, just typing this in real quick. Okay, that's good. Staying safe, hopefully, and everything with all this stuff going on right now. All right, sorry, I didn't have my setup done. How's everyone doing today? I know it's kind of not a usual day for Focus TV, but like I said, ending Mental Health Awareness Month. With May ending, I wanted to have on two mental health coaches, obviously with Ken yesterday, and then Cory today. And today is really going to be an open discussion with him. We have some things that we're going to talk about. I'd also will be taking questions as well. If you guys have any questions for him or for myself, what? I'm so because I've been outside. The sun. So today reached. I think we got up to 109 today. So it's been really hot, and I've been outside. Getting really tan. Let me just wait. Should be connecting. There we go.
There we go.
Sir, how are you?
um,
Right. That's
I'm actually okay. I had to take a couple of days off to kind of just actually to adjust my camera, but not only that, just to kind of cope with everything, you know.
yeah.
Um, and I think that, sometimes, and yes, I'm still adjusting to make sure that you guys can see me fully without seeing the bottom half, which is not coordinated with the top half.
The
So
same with yeah, me. I got shorts on, so
yeah, I'm in news anchor mode. So yeah.
okay.
Um, but no, I just took some days off to kind of cope with not necessarily what's going on in society, but really necessarily what's going on with me. So,
Yeah.
you and I have shared private messages about what I've been kind of working through. And I posted a post today to say that counselors have therapists too, at least I do.
Right.
So to kind of, to make sure that we make sure that I promote the fact that the first thing is I'm human. Above my expertise, above my experiences, we're human. So we all have the same vulnerabilities to be affected by anything in society and anything in our, at our home life. We may just have a better way of coping and a quicker way of rebounding based on what we know.
Right.
That's the only difference. So
Yeah.
me going through this, all the stuff I told you I was going through versus someone who didn't have the coping skills, it could have been a little bit different.
Yeah. No, I
You know,
understand that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I
Um.
have two bottles of water, so I'm good because I
Okay.
talk a lot.
I got mine, which is good. This is now the time. We're going to be talking. I'm going to give people another minute to get in.
No
But
problem.
like I was explaining before you got on, it's not usual for us to have Focus TV on a Thursday, but like I said, with May ending and Mental Health Awareness Month ending, I definitely wanted to get Ken in yesterday, you on today, to just speak about mental health and how important it is to us. And then obviously with everything that's going on in the world, especially
Hmm.
right now, I think this is a great conversation to have. And as I was telling people who are watching, if you do have questions for Cory or myself, maybe on your own mental health or just different things and different topics, please feel free to either ask them in the comments, I can see them, or ask them in the questions box. I'm constantly checking. So um, I'm going to get started, and I kind of wanted to preface everything first and kind of disclaimer that anything that Cory and I say obviously are our opinions. Cory has
Right.
his opinion. I have my opinion, whether it be on what's going on in the world right now or what goes on in our lives. So keep that in mind. Everyone has the right to their own opinion, obviously it being 2020, but just keep that in mind as we're speaking. And like I said, anyone who has comments or questions, please put them in the comment box. And it is very difficult now to try to unpack everything that is going on. So I also want to state that is that we're not going to unpack everything, because for some it's triggering, and I understand that,
It is.
and we're going to get into that a little bit more about triggering and how that can really affect us. But I wanted to start with everything that's going on and social media. How do I find a time to rest my brain? Now, I know one solution is to just turn off the news. I don't watch the news, but turn off the news, step away from my phone. But there's an
Mm.
inundation, especially now with all the
Right.
information that we're getting, that it's very hard to step away from this stuff. How do I deal with that, and how do I compart part yes put it in different compartments?
Compartmentalize.
Yeah, I don't know why I was having such a hard time with that, but yes, compartmentalize all that stuff that's going on right now.
Well, the phrase that I've been kind of bouncing back and forth with some of my other black male counselors and therapists is, well, it's two phrases. It's either secondhand trauma or vicarious trauma. So I want the viewers to keep in mind that anything that we click on has opportunity to invade us in ways that we didn't expect. It's almost like being a first responder. If you are not prepared to go into a scene where there's death and mayhem and body parts, you may walk away with secondhand trauma, although you are not part of the incident. So the first thing I want people to understand is that a lot of us, because a lot of black people identify with that person. That could be our brother, that could be our father, that could be our son. I have two sons who are teens, and I have conversations often. So that's the first thing is mind your mental health. Understand that if you feel triggered, then you are triggered. If you feel a sense of heightened emotions, validate that. That's affirmation that it's affecting you. And at that point, you can make a decision as to how many times you want to view a video. I tell you, with everything going on, I have not viewed a single video. Viewing
Right.
the details written up was enough for me. I was triggered by just the details. So, and yesterday, and I had a conversation with someone on Facebook who has this earnest propensity, although I understand his motive, to send me videos that actually support what I'm talking about. And I kindly told him, I said, well, I want you to be understanding that I'm going to protect my mental health and ask you not to send me those videos, because you may be damaging someone else's mental health. And be mindful that while you're forwarding with the best intent, the people who are receiving these may not have the capabilities to judge the fact that they're watching these 20 times, and each time you're more triggered, towards you may suffer from a form of anxiety and or PTSD down the road, and don't realize the source was you viewing these videos in your timeline all day.
Right.
And you made an excellent point of turning off. For me, I have no alerts for social media. So if you send me a DM, I don't know until I check it. If you send me a comment on a post, Facebook, LinkedIn, anywhere that I can receive anything, I purposely don't have an alert, because that's my control.
Right.
Because the fact is, we have a whole life outside of that phone. We have a
Yeah.
whole life outside of that computer. So when we focus on the whole life, we are less likely to be impacted by the social media life. So
Yeah.
that's where the balance is. And for some people who are, held up at home by themselves during this pandemic, feel like that is their life, because they
Right.
have no other means of interaction. And that's the time I ask you, how about if we invest in some hobbies? How about you order things on Amazon that supports your hobbies, instead of being so invested in something that 6 months down the road you realize that you've been so triggered that you can't turn off the triggers.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you brought up a good point. I don't know if people have children who are watching, or I don't have children, but obviously you have two kids,
Yes.
and they're living through this now too. How hard is it for you to not police it, and terrible word that I just used, but to watch over what they're taking in themselves, to then have to explain what is going on, whether it be the pandemic or everything that's going on with the police and such.
Okay, so I have two teenagers, well, almost 13 and 16. So they have to be on their computers because that's homeschooling.
Right.
I'm working full time doing whatever I do. So, and I was just thinking about this earlier because I was going to translate this into a message later. Between my breaks, I go upstairs. I talk to them. I see how they're doing. I check on their feelings. I say, how are you feeling? I may have checked on you an hour ago, but you may have seen something that may have triggered you. And as kids, you don't have the language. So I just go up and I say, hey, how you feeling? Is there anything you need? So it's really about opening the conversation so they feel comfortable that if they do feel triggered or they have a question, but my 6-year-old is more in tune with what's going on socially. So he'll come to me and tell me how hurt he is or how upset he is about something. Then we have a conversation about how we move forward as a family. So I think that it depends on the age group of your child because they can only handle so much. If you're on a cell phone and on computers, you may want to build in controls that will limit. So, for example, between 8 and 5, when you should be minding your school studies, there's a limit where you can't go on Facebook.com. There's a limit where you can't open the Instagram app.
Right.
Because those tools are there. I have kids, so I have to activate those controls if necessary. So there are ways to do it, but we have to kind of test them and see how it works. But always be available to help your kids translate what they're seeing.
Okay. Now, when we talk about self-care, I know it's very hard for men to get in tune with their feelings and their emotions. Why do you find that most men don't really use the tools that they have around them, if they have them, that is, or even seek help per se?
Well, I think that, I think for some men, when we hear self-care, some of us think, we have to do our nails. We have to get our toes done. We have to have a facial. But self-care could be opening your windows and letting sunlight in because that activates your body's natural emotional defense. That's and that's a fact. It could be just taking time and doing what you love. Because sometimes we are, as men, we're taught to be obligated to our work and providing. So sometimes the self-care means I'm doing something that doesn't offer me any pay. I'm doing something that doesn't offer me any benefit to my family, but who cares? I would rather have a man take time to do what he loves and comes back and gives me that result of self-love. So for example, my husband loves doing his family tree. The ancestry thing. He could be here for hours doing it. 2 hours later, he's happy, he's satisfied. I didn't bother him. So I'm getting that result of joy that he got in taking care of something that he loved, that had nothing to do with family obligation, that had nothing to do with paying a bill, that had nothing to do with being macho. It was just something that he enjoys the most. So self-care is often misunderstood by men as pampering, as something that, okay, it's for women. No, self-care can mean just playing your PlayStation and doing your favorite game that does not require you to worry about, life struggles.
What about the ones who, and there's plenty of us who've said it before that, I don't speak. I don't like to talk about what's going on in my brain. How do we break down that wall ourselves? Because I think for the most part, some of those people don't have people that they feel that they can talk to. That's why they don't.
Well, I think that we actually have people, but because of our conditioning of what talking means, when you grow up and you look at your father and if he was a stereotypical stoic father, you didn't see him talk, but you saw him discipline. You saw him, make sure that the house is taken care of. So it's not that we don't have them. We don't know how to utilize them. So we're waiting on permission. I think a lot of men are saying, or crying out is, if you let me know that I can talk, I will. So keep that in mind. It's not that we can't. But I want to ask you personally, so how much easier has it been for you when a friend or a loved one or a coworker says, it's okay to talk. You're talking and you're shedding is not a burden. Right. So you may find it easier knowing that you've always wanted to talk to certain people, but now that you have permission that you really didn't need, you are more apt to, sharing those things. And then after you share it, you realize, I feel a lot better just speaking it out. Right. So I think that sometimes people think that the word mental health means you have to have therapy or you have to have a counselor. No, mental health is just that, your mental health. So no matter what it takes for you to be sound in that, it could be writing in a journal. I literally just bought an adult book of coloring for stress and anxiety for me.
Okay.
So when I feel stressed out and it's upstairs, I should have brought it. It's a coloring book like this big. And when I'm stressed out and I feel like I don't have a coping skill, I'll pull out my crayons at 46 and just color.
Okay.
And that's it.
I just think about, because I know there's this perception of private people and people who feel that they don't like to share because they don't want to share to the world, their innermost
Yeah.
thoughts. How do you get into that, or how does a person get out of that? Because you say it's conditioned, right? This is a
Yeah. It's
learned,
conditioned.
it's a learned thing from our younger days. So how are we able to then get out of that if that's what I've been taught all this time?
Well, I'm going to go into my counseling mode and say the first thing I ask is, well, what makes you believe that you can't talk? Because then it puts it on you to tell me exactly what processes or what events have spawned that perception. It could be that you were shut down. It could be that when you were talking with your father, he shut you down saying men don't talk like that. It could be your first lover that made you feel like your feelings are, over the top.
Right.
And your lover said, oh, only females do that. So you committed that to your heart saying, I can't come forward again because I was hurt when I came forward. So for me, the source is what gave you that understanding. And then once we get to the understanding, now we unravel that whole thing of let's change that perception. Is that first thing first, when anyone comes into my service, you are human first.
Right.
So that means if you have to cry like the whole hour, I don't care. I'm not going to tell anybody. But if that's what you needed, because some of us are waiting for that opportunity just to unload. And so I always tell people that the meanest people are probably some of the most gentle people you'll ever meet. But something happened, whereas it turned it up. It made their whole emotional side look unacceptable to them first. Because we project what we think of ourselves. So if we think our feelings are unaccepting, if we feel that our feelings are not worth the conversation, I'm going to assume that Ray thinks the same thing. Because I can only feel that way if I make you believe that you feel the way about me too.
Okay.
So when I change how I think about how you may feel about me, that's when I come from under the covers and say, hey, before anything else, so before I'm being black, before I'm gay or straight, I'm human. And because I'm human, I have the right to have all these feelings.
Okay. I want to, because it's intertwined with how we feel and what's going on, obviously, right now, for the people who want to express themselves, because I think there's a lot of us. I found myself in this predicament this morning because, you wake up and it's one of those things that this is happening. Why is this happening again?
Right.
And now more consistently.
Yeah.
So the biggest, I think the biggest kind of issue I've had with myself is saying I want to speak, but not being able to formulate the words and the expressions to be able to get out everything that I want to properly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So how do I go about expressing myself if I don't even know myself how to do that? Because it might not come out in words.
Well, I always say that for me, my first job is to validate your feelings. I don't always validate reactions because reactions can be it could be counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve. But if you're angry about something, whether or not anybody thinks that you're justified, it's not their business. But if you have an emotion, it's real. If you're feeling it and you can express it through your actions, that's valid. So I want to teach people to validate their own feelings. And whatever words you have, even if you say, I don't know, it's something. I feel like the first thing is we have to take the cap off the bottle first. And we sometimes feel like we have to have an exact phrase for what we're feeling. Some people don't know what anxiety means. So they can't tell you, I feel anxiety. They can tell you, I feel pressured. I feel bothered. I feel, I feel spun up. I feel like if I go outside, I'm afraid. I feel like if I see a police car, I start to panic. But that's anxiety. So I feel like we have to tell people, just use your words. And then as you start using your words, you get used to it, you'll have more words.
Okay.
And if you feel like you can't formulate the right words, seek out somebody that can help you to capture your feelings. Because again, my job as a counselor first is to validate that whatever your human experience is, it's okay. I'm more worried about the reaction of those feelings. Meaning, if you're angry, what do you do in result of anger? What do you do in result of anxiety?
Right.
Are you suicidal? That's my concern. So you can be angry and suicidal. I don't want that for you. But you can be angry and just sit down. I'm more concerned about the reactions of the emotions and just letting people just say whatever it is, because again, it's about words. It's about, if you've never had to say it, you usually don't know the first time.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. I wanted to sit in the validation conversation for a little bit, because
Sure.
especially with the popularization of social media, everyone is looking for that validation. Where does that come from? Is that another learned thing where I seek validation from other people?
I would say it's generational. I would say, like, for my son, he's 16, so what he knows is social media. At 16, I didn't have social media.
Right.
So I wasn't dealing with the thing of let me post every picture, because nobody's posting a Polaroid anywhere. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
No one's posting a Kodak. Like, where are you going to post it? It's in your. So you take pictures. Where is it? In your family photo album. No one is there to validate whether that's a cute pic or not, right? So when you look at when you look at how things unfold, and then you look at the fact of how do I feel about me? I tell people in this new iteration of where I am in my life, I only post to let people know that I work and that I'm alive. If I don't post, I realize it messes up the algorithm. That's really the reason why I post often. There were times where I was seeking validation and I literally didn't know it. So if I post a pic, it was never scantily clad, but if I post a pic and you get 700 likes, well, as soon as that dies down, you go back to the same feelings of self-inadequacy. And this could be the people that you consider the most physically fit, the most astute, the most educated, the most beautiful. It has no qualifications. So lack of self-love has no lack of qualifications.
Right.
You could be the most high achieving person, and you could be the most low achieving person and think you're all that. So we've seen the variances. So validation for me, and so validation is dangerous. So anyone watching out there, validation means you will do something at almost any cost just to get approved. Self-love.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, because I was going to say, could then someone asking or seeking validation almost be a cry for help a little bit?
I don't know if it's a cry for help as opposed to a cry for self-exploration. So I wanted to say validation can be dangerous. Self-love is always about boundaries. So think about the two terms. Validation is always about what am I willing to do to get that acceptance. Self-love is what am I willing to do to keep my sanity. So those are two different things.
Right.
And people can look at their past relationships and realize, was I in this for 5 years because I was loved, or 5 years because they chose me? That's powerful. That's why people sometimes stay in abusive relationships. So I'm shifting it just a little bit, because right now in this time of COVID and self-isolation, people are finding that, the rates of child abuse, the rates of sexual assault, the rates of domestic violence are rising, because people are having to identify these things right now. Why am I here?
Right.
Folks are pressured. So if anyone watching and you don't know whether you're validating or not, I would say, can you go without social media for 14 days? Can you go without posting for 14 days? Can you go without sending a flirtatious message for 14 days? Can you turn off all alerts for 14 days? If not, I would beg to think that you may want to evaluate what your social media presence means to you.
I would assume, and assumptions are pretty bad, but validation and attention kind of go hand in hand. That's my assumption. With that being said, are they the same thing, or do they go different paths?
Well, I want to try these two words: validation and affirmation.
Okay.
Affirmation is always a positive thing. There was no such thing as a negative affirmation.
Right.
Because it affirms. So like you sent me a text earlier, like today, was it? And you affirmed that you thought about me and that you cared about me during this time.
Yesterday.
That that's an affirming message. Validation means I'm waiting on you to feel something that I can't feel myself.
Okay.
Validation says I don't feel these things right now for myself, so when you give it to me, that's why it's always temporary. If I was single and I needed that, and you sent me something that was salacious or loving, it's filling me up until I need another message from you. So yes, it was temporary. So validation is never a permanent thing, unless it's career wise, unless you're going to be a doctor and you pass your board exams. That's validating that you have the knowledge. So let's place validation where it matters most. It doesn't matter in the personal realm. It matters most in your profession and your field of study. Affirmation matters most in the in the personal realm. So like if I'm so like my husband, I have to affirm and he has to affirm that we're good. If not, we got to do some work so we can get back to that affirmation. My kids have to affirm that I'm being, a good dad. If not, let's get back to let's do the work that gets us to an affirmation. So that's how validation can be dangerous. And I can raise my hand and say I was there. I stayed in relationships where I was beat, where I was beat. I still have I still have a hearing loss in my left ear because I stated something was that validated my lack of self-love.
So can love then be either one, affirmation or validation?
No, I don't think love is. I think love is always affirmation.
Okay.
Even if love stands up to you and say, "Hey Ray, I'm calling you because I notice some behavior that may not be benefiting you right now." I'm affirming that I notice you in a way that I want you to be better. I'm not validating anything. I'm saying that my love for you wants you to be better. So that's still affirming that I notice.
Okay.
Validating means that you have to do A, B, and C in order to get my approval.
Okay. Even
so in my opinion,
in like in an abusive relationship?
in an abusive relationship, and it's tricky because some people stay for different reasons, so we can't judge why until we know the story.
Right.
But sometimes some people, and this is my story, so I'm going to tell people, who may hear this and can identify as I stayed in relationships because I was afraid of losing something else. I lost so much in my natural family growing up that, oh my God, if I lost this person, it would count more than losing them than saving myself. So that's where validation came in the space of self-love. Self-love says I have boundaries. No, you're not going to hit me. And if so, this is a consequence. Validation says, oh, okay, so you only hit me a couple of times. That's better than me being raped as a child for 6 years. So I balanced it out. I made it work because I assumed it was better than what I had experienced as a child. Looking back in the position where I am now, would I pick the same person? Nope. I wouldn't pick them because I'm better for myself now.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, that definitely makes sense. So I know another thing you wanted to speak about was, especially sitting in this quarantine, being a male, how we've revisited, or we might have revisited past traumas, current traumas, and how we can deal with that. And again, I hearken to say that everything that's going on right now, to sit in this, how do we deal? It's just a lot.
I'm glad it's happening for me now because I'm in a space where even if I didn't have kids or my husband, I would be okay because I settled those things. Had this happened 6, 7, 8 years ago, I probably would have been a hot mess. But sitting by yourself, especially those who do not have company, who do not have a spouse or a lover or kids or anyone else, or even a roommate, we're forced to sit with ourselves all day. We can't run from what we've been hiding from through our brunches, through our workouts, through our hookups, through our social apps, through texting all day. We have to sit down and say, wow, I don't know if I like myself. I don't know if I like this stuff that keeps coming up that I've sat with and lied to myself and to others about. So some of us are not liking ourselves right now. Although we may have everything going on, educationally and financially, but that one or two things that have happened in our childhood or in our past makes us feel unqualified. It makes us feel like, wow, someone else is going to notice my gimmick. And it's, and we have something called, in therapy, it's called imposter syndrome. Whereas everything's fun and games. Look, like, I mean, I work out 5 days a week. I have a six-pack. I have a great job. I'm in the government. I'm a G12. You know, it's a, it's a normal thing in DC. But I'm still afraid that if they find out these one or two things, they're gonna know my jig is up. If they find out that I've had a rough childhood, if they find out that I still have a hard time accepting myself, that my jig is up. So some of us are facing the imposter syndrome head on. And the one thing I always tell people is, let the feelings happen. But so the thing that we've done is we haven't let them happen. That didn't change the fact that they're going to happen. That just made it more intense. And it's different coping as a 28-year-old with those things versus being 50 and finally dealing with something that happened at age 17. So I always advise, you know, let those feelings happen, because that's what the process is. The only way to come through it is to go through it. And it can look ugly. You have lifelines. I think, again, so we're going back to the first part of the conversation. If you don't feel you can talk to your friends, then why are your friends there? I only pick friends I can be myself with. Right. So you have to understand that perhaps you're not picking your friends the way that you're supposed to. You're picking your friends on surface level elements. We could all have the same brunch boots and go to New Orleans and still act like we cool and get drunk, but no one's talking serious stuff. Right. So why are you my friend if I can't be my full Cory or my full Ray? I can be human. So that's what we have to evaluate. Why are we associated with people that don't support our most authentic self?
Very good. Very good point. I wanted to talk about that masking and that syndrome you were talking about, because I think about past traumas that just me personally might have happened in my life, and not to mask them, to hide them, but to not bring it out for the public. So it might be so traumatic in my life that if I were to think about it and to talk about it, I break down. And I don't want that to happen outside. Does that mean then I have to just unmask myself every time I'm inside? Does that make sense?
No. Well, yes, it does. And okay. So again, it goes back to my point is, my friends will check on me, because even though I'm a counselor, I have friends checking on me. Because, hey, Cory, because one of them said, I know you do a lot for people. I'm checking on you because I know you take in a lot. And I value that so much because, wow, you let me be human. And even if I wasn't human, I was going to bother you anyway and tell you I need to talk. So, again, why are our friends in place? Are our friends allowing us to be human first? So no matter what we have in common, can I call you and be on the verge of tears and you understand and you don't tell me, well, suck it up, you know, or get over it? And also understand that because some of your friends may not be uncomfortable with dealing with those things, it may come across as rejection. But it's not rejection all the time. It's more so saying, I don't even know how to cope with what you're going through. So I'm going to say, let's shut it down. Let's drink. You know, let's smoke. You know, when you look at people who are, because of the work I do, when I look at people who may be substance abusers or alcohol or even sex, I'm not worried about the sex or the alcohol. I'm worried about what events sponsored you walking into that and feeling like that's an okay way of coping with it. So then we face judgment, meaning I'm afraid of judgment. So sometimes we call people friends way too quickly because we haven't tested the water. You know, let me test you with some real shit. But I want to go back to the point where you're saying having to do it in public or private. Yeah. There are some things that my husband knows now because that's my husband. Right. But the public doesn't know. So at home in this domain, I'm just Cory. I don't coach my kids. I don't coach my husband. I talk flat-footed, and hell, he's seen me cry. He's seen, you know, I told you over the last 3 weeks, I've dealt with 3 different deaths in my family. Right. I didn't post it on social media, but he knows I've, you know, had to leave town. I've had to make the emergency trip. I've had to counsel family. I've had to be a grief counselor to some people. But the last 2 days, I told you I was supposed to do a video. I told you I couldn't do it because I was tired. Right. I admitted to you I was tired. I wasn't even ashamed of it. I was like, dude, I tried, but yeah, I'm tired. And that brings up a good point that I wanted to ask you, because you deal with it for a living. Like, you do this is your job. For the people who are that strong friend, how, I kind of know the easy answer to this, but I think it's a little bit harder, because I'm going to ask, when is it acceptable to then say no? So if someone,
people are constantly coming to you and saying, "Hey, I got this problem. I got this problem." Now, we talked about this a little bit last time we spoke, but like, then who do you reach out to? But it's not even about that. It's about taking this all on, but then having the wherewithal to then say, "Hey, I can't right now," without feeling bad about it.
Yeah. So I've dealt with this recently. But I also deal with people who are in crisis. I've had to deal with two black men who are on the verge of suicide. I had to talk them off the ledge. I love what I do. I'm glad that they're still here with us. I can still text them now, but there was a point where it's just like, okay, I was your lifeline to save you for a while, but now I got to save myself. So respectfully, I may not answer you today. Had you asked me this question about 5 years, I would have felt guilty because I thought that my job was to wear the cape and save the world.
Right.
Now my motto is I save only who the universe sends my way. So I'm
Okay.
not rushing out, seeing a post and say, "Oh my God, let me help you because I see something." It's more so like, you know who I am and you've heard about me. So everyone who has talked to me they've been referred to me. So it wasn't like I was going out trying to, because me saving the world was validation for me that I was doing a good job. So I want you to hold that close.
Yeah.
5 years ago, I was validating myself, running myself tired and sleepy, not sleeping and absorbing, but not wringing out the sponge. So again, self-love is about boundaries. I love myself enough to where this is my boundary, so that I can keep that intact. Um, and there was some point where this week I said, "Well, I can't talk to you." Now I pray that they wouldn't go off and do the wrong thing, such as such as going through with the suicide attempt. But I had to realize I come first.
Mm-hmm.
So lo and behold, if I got a message on Facebook saying they did it from somebody else, I'd have to be okay with that because
Okay.
I came first.
Right.
And I have a lot of counselor friends that deal with burnout.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. I don't do burnout. Unless I'm in a crisis and I'm called off to deal with a crisis or major, like a disaster. I monitor myself, and it's only so many hours of crisis stuff that I do a week. I don't do it full time because I know it's draining. And going back to us knowing, when you know your authentic self, but you know your limits, like you know your limits of the type of people you can be around without being triggered.
Mm-hmm.
You know your triggers and you honor those triggers. So your triggers are not to always be undone, because some triggers will live with you forever, right? So honor the triggers that are there. If something makes you uncomfortable, call it uncomfortable. And if it begs for a further conversation, don't be afraid, because the truth is, if someone loves you, they are willing to have a conversation.
Is everyone capable of taking it on though? And I know that question is subjective, because there are some people who aren't mentally strong enough to be
Mhm.
able to take on other people's problems. But do we all have that capability to be able to help someone?
No. And I will tell you this, when what most people don't know is that, especially during your childhood, if you're dealing with ongoing childhood trauma while your brain is developing, because that's when it's happening, people don't know that trauma actually has a physical effect on the brain. So it turns off certain types of responses and makes other responses more glaring. So when you become 17 or 30 and you realize that you don't have the capacity to deal with, that type of escalation, it could be because your childhood trauma made you at that point incapable of the same expression that the average person has. So again, when I'm dealing with, clients, and I'm dealing with, age-old trauma that's happened over years during your childhood, I have to assume that there's some damage that's permanent, but it wasn't your fault.
Okay.
It's just that it happened during the time where so for example, if you had trauma right now, let's say it's just emotional trauma, your brain's already formed. So we're talking about undoing most of that. So, but some people just are not capable. And also some people who don't realize that they have more self-centered nature, meaning I'm going to talk to you for my benefit. And I've actually had to call some friends and I said, well, I've noticed in our interactions, you only contact me when there's a problem,
Right.
but you never contact me when it's just okay. So I have to ask you, what type of transaction relationship is this? So there are people that don't even know that, and I would also say some people don't even know that they have the power to positively affect someone else because no one forced them to answer the call.
Right. So I want to stay on the past trauma because in my head I have this thought that if you've had past trauma, if I continue to bring it up, let's say in decades time, so every 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what it may be, but I'm going to use death for example. And
Okay.
I bring it up every 10 years and I still continue to feel the same way I did when it initially happened. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say now that I'm 50 or 60, does that
Mm-hmm.
mean that I have not yet dealt with that trauma or I'm still processing it?
Well, I would say grief is trauma only if you haven't coped well. So, for example, there are friends that can't talk about the passing of their father, although the father passes seven.
Mm,
Um, in the case of the incident I told you about, I was counseling, the mother of my cousin who lost her daughter, and I told her specifically, I said, "What?" Because she thought she was crazy because she couldn't sleep, and no, I said, right now, but you're having a normal response to an abnormal life event. Period. Now, when we talk 5 months later, if it's still the same, and if it renders you and if it renders you incapable of processing life, then we have to see somebody. But for the case that you're giving, if you have the same reaction that renders you incapable of enjoying life, incapable of seeing past that, I would say that you're long overdue for some discussion
mm,
of how to cope. And perhaps you're dealing with coping the way that you've seen other people deal with it. So let's say, God forbid, if it's a parent and you never saw your other parent grieve. Now they may have grieved in the bedroom by themselves after work, but you guys never had an, conversation. You were never taught that it was okay to just let it out. Although that person is crying every night.
right.
So it could be learned behavior that for you, grief is that thing that you're not supposed to deal with. So now someone like myself or someone who can notice that you just need an educational path of understanding that grief is okay. And grief never ends. Grief just changes over time.
That goes back to expressing emotion as well, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like stating,
Yeah, so
and the reason I say is because I don't know, and I'm just throwing it out there, but saying I love you.
uh-huh.
So weird, not weird story, but funny story. My mother and I, it's been just me and her my entire life. Um, it has been a thing where people have seen or they've heard me on the phone with her, and when we get off the phone, we just say bye. There is no I love you, any of that. We reserve the I love yous for, when I moved here and all that, but
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like special occasions. But people don't understand that that's just not how we expressed our love to each other. So that's why I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to make the connection as far as the grief is concerned. It's not a traumatic experience for me, by no means, because
Right.
I can
Okay.
express my emotions. But with that being said, can that happen to a person where then it affects other parts of their or other relationships? I would say.
Well, let's speak about you and your mother. We have this thing called love languages.
Right.
We have this thing where what does love look like to you? And this is one of the questions that I've learned in brand new relationships. If you guys are watching and you're dating or you're just finding out, one question I want you guys to ask each other is what makes you feel loved and appreciated? Because oftentimes we're driving off the thing that we did with the last person. So in my family, if we show love a certain way, I'm going to go into my relationships showing that, while the other person may feel that it's inadequate because no one expressed that that doesn't do anything for me.
Right.
So it's not about what you and your mother do, it's about how other people interpret it. And if you guys are sufficient and it works and you guys are still close, you have to not care. Because then you have to ask, well, why does my interpretation of love to my mother affect you? And they can probably tell you because I expected something different based on what I feel love looks like. It's always personal. There's no universal way of expressing love. Just like affection. Some people are not affectionate just because that's not what they saw growing up.
Right.
And I remember watching something by Janet Jackson, and she said, all the years that I witnessed my parents, I never saw them kiss. What do you think that does with a child when they get into relationships and they don't think that that's normal, or that's not even a subject, and the other person like, "Ooh, can you just give me a kiss after work?"
Right.
It's not bad that she doesn't know it. It's bad that the other person didn't express that that's what they needed. So it really is personal. Love is personal to every one of us 7 point something billion folks in the world. It's never going to look identical, but we have an opportunity, to say, this is what love looks like to me. Can you satisfy that? And then you got to be honest and say, perhaps I cannot. And that could be a disqualifier in terms of, a relationship. Because at some point, what you're not giving to someone, they're going to want that much more. So all this boils down to having these conversations that really open up the doors to, to us using our words as adults and to us expressing and not depending on mind reading. That runs vagrant a lot in all of our friendships and in any interaction is we assume you should know what I need from you.
Right. With our expressions, how much is too much? Because I'm trying to think of how to say this. It might be a Facebook rant, but one that speaks too much to how I'm feeling, or I'm crying for an hour instead of 30 minutes. Is there such a thing as being too emotional or too sensitive to whatever I'm feeling?
I would say this: if you're doing something to heal, if you're with somebody hoping that what you do with them heals your past pain, it's too much. They don't know that story yet. They don't know. I don't know why you're doing that. I don't know that it's to satisfy something that you felt as a child. Now we can have the conversation and say, hey, maybe I overdo it on the affection because I needed my mother's hugs. My father never knew what it meant that I needed a hug from him. But when you're using your tools of expression to satisfy old trauma, old pain with someone that doesn't know the story, it looks like way too much.
Yeah.
And when you talk about crying a lot, when you're crying and you don't know why, because when I was dealing with depression years ago, and this was 20 years ago, there were times I was crying and could not tell you why I was crying. There were times where I couldn't wake up and couldn't give you a valid reason why. I didn't know, like, it wasn't because I was sad, because in our community and most people have this misinterpretation that depression means sadness, but depression means darkness and void. And in a void, you don't have anything to reach after. You don't have anything to reach for because there's nothing there. Sadness is temporary, but and sadness could be part of grief or something else. But sadness has a way of hopefully resolving itself over time. But depression is that thing where you can cry for hours and get sick of yourself because you can't stop. So it depends on the nature and the severity of what you're going through.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because especially in this quarantine where a lot of people have sat with themselves, even if we are with someone, we're dealing with what we're seeing on the news now and social media now.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that we've crossed that line? Because like you said, sadness isn't depression, but they seem pretty close to.
Well, visually, let's say visually they look alike.
Sorry, visually they look really close, but feeling wise, they might be different. How do I know the difference then, that I haven't crossed over into depression? Because I would assume to say that everyone's depression looks different.
Yeah, you can be functional. Yes, you can be. You could have an 8 to 5 job and look like the most pristine person at work, and then as soon as you get in that car, you're overwhelmed because you've been holding it in. It's like a functional alcoholic, a functional crack addict. We have ways that we function because we know we have to achieve a certain thing for a livelihood, but I know I'm still not well.
Right.
And this goes back to looks. Folks will say, well, you don't look like you should be depressed because you're handsome or you're pretty, you're fit. You have a great job. You drive a Maserati. Why are you sad? Boom. Wrong thing. Because depression is not about material things. It's about a mechanism inside of you that says, I'm not enjoying any of these material things. I don't find satisfaction in life. Um, you may find yourself just wandering deep in thought, meaning you can't find a context of joy. There's nothing that you can do that brings you any semblance of joy.
Right.
You may find yourself finding these coping skills that don't go well, meaning perhaps that may be the basis why you have random sexual exploits. That may be the reason why you're drinking more than you should by yourself. That may be the reason why you're taking sleeping pills because you want to sleep it away. So it really looks, so you have to look at the person's skills of coping. What are they using, to cope with this? And if it's not working, you can only go darker. And that's when sometimes you have to just reach out and say, I can't get over this overwhelming void. Meaning when you look in the void, you don't see anything good in the distance at all. Like no matter what I do, I can go have the flyest haircut because after we have a nice haircut, don't we all feel sexy for a day?
Changes. Brand new man.
Listen, I know after this quarantine, I'm gonna be fly as hell because I got that haircut and my nails didn't look. My feet don't look right now. I'm not impressed about it, but I'm sad about it. But but the average person can't feel that joy.
Right.
A haircut won't help. All that stuff. So yeah.
And so I asked Ken this question yesterday, and I don't think I asked you the first time we spoke. So I really wanted to ask you too, because of what you do, you take on a lot of other people's problems.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you have your own problems, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
When does it then start affecting your mental health by taking on more of other people's problems? Or do you not let the two cross into each other?
No, like I said before, self-love is a boundary for me. But my story is I was on the other side of all this. I was the victim. I was the one on the therapist couch. Then I became a life coach. Okay, great. So life coaching really is about setting goals and let's set a plan. So it's not about problems. It's about let's set a goal. Let's see what's avoiding you from getting there. Let's see what assets you have and what things we have to build in. Then when I started to do my studies as a counselor and going into crisis and trauma management, for me the joy is because I bring a coaching background. It's all about goals. So unless we're talking about goals, and even if the goal is a new feeling, what do we plan in terms of counseling, in terms of the remedies? And we got to follow a plan. Now we can deviate if we realize a part doesn't work, but there are times where I have to say, okay, well, and usually with my work, I turn it back on you because I want you to own who you are. I want you to walk in that confidence saying, hey, I may be a little broken, but I'm still okay. Right. I'm still worthy of joy. So I ask you more questions than I give you advice. So it's like, okay, let me find out what you've done so far. Let me find out. So let me put you on the hot seat and say, yeah, you pay me to do this, but what have you done? And then if it hasn't worked, because one thing I don't want to do is have you do things again that you've tried already. So, and then I always put it back on the person because what we don't realize is that we have so much resilience. And someone like me or anyone else just needs to reaffirm that you've always had these things that you haven't used yet. So that's why for me, it's always a boundary of like, okay, after this call is over, I take my notes. But then what I do is I always check on you at least the next 1 or 2 days because that feels good for me. And it also lets you know that someone cares because some clients I have never talked to their friends about these things, never have told their mother about these past secrets, never have told anybody but me. So because you trusted me with that goal or that secret or that haunt, I feel it's my responsibility to check and make sure that you're good because there have been a couple of sessions where my clients have told me after that session I had to go and have a drink, had to take a day off because I revealed so much that I had never talked about. But they were happy that someone heard them.
As we wrap up here, I wanted you, because you have the training and you have all of the accolades behind you, to just leave us with a little bit of a gem, especially with everything that's going on, because I think for some people, I think for most, a lot of people are starting to wake up more.
Mm-hmm.
And for some, they're realizing that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
So just a little gem that you can leave us with getting us through these times and with everything that's going on.
Awesome. So what I would like to share is, in this time of sitting by yourself, for those who don't have family, friends, lovers, kids, or roommates, understand that this is the perfect time for you to understand that it's okay to not like yourself until you like yourself. It's okay to have the conversations with yourself to say why I don't like myself. It's also okay to understand that even in your brokenness, you're still complete. So there's an analogy I have, and I posted this before. We're all a puzzle, just that some of us have pieces that are closer than others. So never think that just because you're dealing with something emotional that you're not whole. It's just that your pieces may be across the room. So calling someone like me just helps you to pull that string a little closer. And you realize, that's when you realize you've always had it, because you were never lost. You were just broken. And at the end of the day, people who love you, and this is a popular thing I say, your mental well-being is never a burden to those who truly love you. That's your friends. That's the people that you have connected to. So utilize them for more than just a drink. Utilize them for a heart-to-heart, and you'd be surprised that they were waiting on you to answer the door.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. Well, run down your social media. People who are watching aren't following you right now, so they can follow you and get your services.
Awesome. So my website is CoryGeorge.com. It's Cory, and it's always C-O-R-Y. People want to put an E in my name. C-O-R-Y dot CoryGeorge.com. And on Instagram, which is the best way to reach me, is Cory_George_coaching. And I look forward to talking to any one of you if you may need, in not just services, but just, even if I can't help you, to point you in the direction of where you may need to be, because I don't know all things, and I'm more careful of making sure I don't put you in a space of more hurt, and point you in a space where someone else may be qualified in a certain area of counseling that I'm not.
Awesome. And all of Cory's social media and his website will be on this in IGTV when this is all done. Thank you, Cory, for joining us this evening. I'll talk to you after
Awesome. Thank you
this.
for having me again.
All right.
Bye.
All right, so I'd like to thank Cory for coming on. Like I said, this video will be on IGTV when this is all said and done. And just to echo everything that Cory has said, especially with everything that's going on right now, please understand that it is okay to not be okay, to feel whatever you're feeling and to express what you need to express, however you want to express it. Like I had told him this morning, I just didn't know how to formulate the words of what I was feeling and everything that I had inside of me, that sometimes I just had to reach out to my friend. So like Cory says, to reach out to him, even not just for services, but just to talk. The same goes for me. Everyone knows what my Instagram is. If this goes beyond fitness and all that, if anyone just wants to talk and chat, please feel free to know that everything is open and you can certainly do that. Tomorrow, regular time, regular show, not regular show, I'm sorry, but 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm still waiting. I might have a guest tomorrow. I did want to put everything focus aside, even just for a day, to really unpack and talk about everything that is going on right now. The best thing that we can do for each other is continue to love on each other, but also to have these open conversations about what is going on. There's always going to be a lot of misinformation and hysteria and things distracting you from really what's going on. So I'm talking to a couple people that might be on tomorrow evening, just so that we can break it down and we can talk about it. But like I said, continue to love on one another, continue to be great, continue to do whatever you're doing right now, and just continue to be kings and queens. I love you all. I will see you guys tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. See you tomorrow.